Hi everybody, it's Raphael with Ohio Tropics, and in today's video I wanted to kind of kill two birds with one stone and talk about number one, why watering schedules are not always a good thing, and number two, I've gotten a lot of questions on from my readers and from my followers about Pilea peperomioides, and I have my two plants here to demonstrate. And number one, I wanted to talk about this particular plant in general and why a watering schedule would have made this plant look pretty bad if I were to stick with a strict watering schedule, and I'll explain why. And I'll also talk about, why is this one so big and why is this one so small when I purchased these all at the same time, around the same time 2.5 years ago. Number one, watering schedules, right? Watering schedules, I don't recommend. It's okay to have regular checkpoints, and I recommend that, right? Regular checkpoints, if you can check on your plants every day, that's fantastic. I know I'm busy. I somehow, sometimes ignore my plants depending on, what projects I'm working on, and so on. But it's hard to do that every day. But if you can do it at least once a week, or twice a week, or maybe you have certain days where you actually check on your plants and observe them, right? That's fine. But why are watering schedules bad, right? That's the first part of this video that I wanted to discuss. So a lot of my readers and a lot of my followers have mentioned, oh, well, this plant's been doing so well, right? And all of a sudden it's looking bad, and I'm not quite sure why. And then they end the comment with, well, and I haven't changed anything, so I don't understand why this plant is no longer thriving. It used to do so well, right? Okay, well, even though you may not have changed something, the plant has changed, right? The plant has changed. So your plant should be growing, right? The vegetation is growing, the roots are growing. Over time, it'll become more pot-bound, right? The seasons are changing. Light is changing, right? There's all sorts of things that are changing. So things are changing, even though you haven't changed it, right? Things are changing. So that's why watering schedules don't work. And again, I do recommend regular checkpoints. Check on your plants a lot, but don't rely on a watering schedule. So for example, with this Pilea, I'm in love with this one, and I try to baby this plant. With this Pilea, this has gotten pretty root bound, right? And I've repotted this a couple times throughout the time that I've had it. But I noticed, and I got into a routine, right? And I'll say one more thing about watering schedules, right? They might work for a period of time, right? But not always. So although you might be in a cadence where you're watering once a week and then it's fine, eventually things will change, right? Conditions will change. Your plant's going to grow. It's going to use up more water, than it perhaps used to. It's going to dry out more quickly, perhaps, right? And so things are going to change. So for this particular plant, a few months ago, once a week watering would be fine, right? But if I were to stick with that and say, well, this is my routine, I'm going to water it once a week. If I were to have stuck with that, right, I would have had a lot of issues, because as this plant has grown and the pot's, more filled with roots, it's drying out a lot more quickly, right? We've had a lot of light. We've been blessed by having a beautiful summer. It's been very sunny here where I live. I can't say that in the winter time. Winter time can be very, very dark, very dingy, but when there's a lot more light, your plant's going to use a lot more water. So you're going to have to be flexible. So if I were to water this plant once a week now, I'll tell you it's going to suffer because it dries out. So right now I'm having to water it maybe every 4 or 5 days or so. I'm not keeping track of the time, but I'm observing, right? I'm observing the soil. I don't go by schedule. I actually put my finger in the soil And if it feels dry, if the surface of it feels dry, then I'll go ahead and water it. And learn to observe, learn to observe. So for example, if you start seeing yellow leaves, right, on your plant, the first thing I'll tell you to look at is take a look at how dry is your soil or how wet is your soil, right? A lot of times it has to do with imbalances in soil moisture, right? More often than not. It could be a light issue, it could be a temperature issue, but more often than not, if you see a yellow leaf at the base of your plant, I want you to go ahead and put your finger at the surface of the soil and feel the soil. Is it dry? If it's dry, give it a water, right? So for example, I have, you know, there's a leaf here I'm just going to pull off that's yellowed, okay? So is it normal for leaves to yellow over time, even under the best of conditions? Absolutely, absolutely, right? However, if you start seeing them pretty rapidly, right, and one after the other, I want you to feel the soil. Don't go by what you've heard in the past, meaning, oh, if, you know, let's say you read on the internet and on some site and it says, if you have yellow leaves on your plants, it means that you're overwatering, or it means blah, 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 right? If you do that without actually observing your plant, without actually observing and feeling the soil, right? Use your senses to tell you what's going on here. Don't just rely on a statement that you read online. That's so critical, right? Because there's news for you, right? Yellow leaves can result from a variety of things, from many, many, many things. So you can't have a blanket statement that says, if you have a yellow leaf, it means you're overwatering. Could it be that? Absolutely. And if everybody's been following me for a while, you'll know that I don't like the word overwatering because it's very misleading. But I'm not going to get into that right now. So observe, right? Observe. So this is why watering schedules do not work, because things change. And even though you're not changing things, maybe you're sticking with the same thing every week that you're doing, your plant is changing. Your plant is growing, right? And things are changing for your plant. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Okay. The other part is I've gotten so many questions from my readers. How do you get your plant? Oh, all these bugs out here. They're eating me alive. How do you get your plant so big? You know, what tips do you have? What secrets do you have? And also, you know, why does this one look a little bit different? Why is this one not as big, right? I'll have to tell you folks, there are no secrets. There are no tricks. There isn't one particular thing that you would need to do to have a houseplant thrive. There are no shortcuts, okay? I can't emphasize the importance of consistency in houseplant care, right? Consistency is so important in houseplant care. You can't be an on-again, off-again, you know, plant parent. That won't work. I mean, some plants might tolerate it, but this one will not. I'll tell you that, right? This is not a plant that you can neglect for long periods of time and expect it to thrive, right? There are no secrets. Consistency is so important, right? So how do I get this plant so big? You know, I've had these for over 2.5 years. They were similar size when I got them. The difference between these two here is that this one had a central plant that was taller than the rest, just like this one. And I actually cut it off and I rooted it and gave it to a friend. And since I cut off that main growing stem, it allowed the pups here to flourish and to fill out the pot. So this is more of a bushy type habit. And in this one here, this tall one, I left it the way it was, and I haven't taken any pups out of it. I just let it grow how it wanted to grow, and that's that. So that's why these are different. Now, what are some good care tips for Pilea peperomioides? Number one is light. Don't underestimate light. Light should be your number one consideration. I have both of these plants growing in two different windows, but both eastern exposure. And these plants do get some morning sun, which is very beneficial, very beneficial. You can grow them in other windows as well. They probably don't prefer to be in sun all day, but a handful of hours of sun is very, very beneficial for these plants, especially morning sun, because morning sun is a little bit more gentle. So number one, make sure that you have your plants right in front of a window, 1 or 2 feet in front of a window, as close as you can. Eastern window's fantastic. A northern window would work well if it's big enough, if you don't have many obstructions outside. If you have a super sunny window, you might want to diffuse the light a little bit and have more filtered sun, but by all means, it needs to be in front of a window for best growth. Number two, fertilizing. So recently I had a follower that asked, well, she was describing how she cared for her plant, and it all sounded good. It all sounded good. She was following watering practices that I'm recommending. She was following light conditions that I'm recommending. But she said, well, it's not really growing. It's not doing too well. The leaves are really small. And I solved her issue with one question. Do you fertilize? And she said, oh, actually, now that you mention it, no. So fertilization is very important, right? When you repot a plant, a lot of the potting mixes will have additional fertilizer added to them, right? Miracle-Gro potting mix adds fertilizer to their potting mixes. There'll be added fertilizer to potting mixes, but eventually that's going to run out. You're going to have to fertilize regularly all throughout the growing season. So I recommend spring through the fall. During the active growing season, make sure you're fertilizing. I like to fertilize dilutely with every watering. So the fertilizer I use Dyna-Gro Grow, and I'll mention that in the link below. So you can purchase that if you'd like. And I follow the directions as far as how can you water and fertilize with every watering. And so you're going to have to reduce the concentration of the fertilizer so that you can water with every watering, so it's going to be more dilute. And the reason I like that method is that it's, you're feeding the plant continually, and you also don't have to remember the last time you fertilized. So if you use a stronger, higher strength, and the label recommends, using it once a month, I don't want to have to keep track of the last time I fertilized. So that's why I like to do fertilize dilutely with every time I water. You don't have to do it that way. That's the way I like to do it, okay? So watering, fertilizing, absolutely important. Well, no, we talked about light, right? Light and fertilizing. The last super important topic is watering, proper watering, okay? So there's a rampant, there's an epidemic or a pandemic, and I'm not referring to the one we're going through right now. I'm referring to the pandemic of improper watering. And I can't stand the word overwatering, and let me explain why. The reason I don't like the word overwatering, right, is because it's totally misunderstood. Why is that? Because most people take it to mean the amount of water that you add to your plant when you water it. And so people get scared and they'll add, a little tiny trickle of water because they're scared of overwatering, right? There's no such thing as overwatering. You want to thoroughly moisten the soil. That is your goal, right? Granted, you have to have good light. You have to have a nicely draining potting mix, right? You have to have, good temperatures, average to warm temperatures, right? You can't have any extreme conditions. If you have good conditions overall, right, there's no reason why you should be scared of overwatering. Your goal is to thoroughly moisten the soil. If you don't do that, you won't have a healthy root system, and therefore you won't have a healthy plant, right? You don't want dry pockets of soil. You don't want dry pockets of roots in your pot. That's your goal, okay? Always water thoroughly until water escapes a drainage hole, right? And make sure that it's not sitting in water. Once the water drains out, make sure it's not sitting in water for extended periods of time. I know sometimes when I If I'm leaving the house, for a vacation, not lately during this pandemic, but if I'm leaving the house for longer periods of time, I might put a little bit of water in the saucer below to help it sustain for a little bit of time, right? But by all means, don't let your plants sit, as a general rule of thumb, in water for too long. Okay. Then I use my finger. How do I know when to water? It's not by a watering schedule as I described. I use my finger and I feel the soil. Okay. Once the surface is dry, and I can feel this one is very dry, it needs a little bit of watering. Hence why I lost this yellow leaf here, right? I'm going to give it a good watering soon, and then keep repeating that schedule. So I hope you found this video to be beneficial. Well, that was interesting. Where was I? I hope you found this video to be beneficial, and comment below with any questions if you have any questions at all on what I spoke about in this episode. And make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the bell so you get notifications for all of my videos, and make sure to subscribe to my Instagram as well, at Ohio Tropics. And last but not least, my houseplant care blog, ohiotropics.com. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for listening.